Hi, this is AC Unit, and welcome to Mini-Logue. Today, I will be painting Lieutenant Titus from the game Warhammer 40,000. Lieutenant Titus is a special model. He's modeled after a lieutenant in the Space Marines faction, but he's also based off of a character from a game, being Space Marine. The most recent Space Marine game, Space Marine 2, has launched I think it came out in September, but it follows Lieutenant Titus as he fights the Tyranid invasion on one of the planets in the Milky Way. Lieutenant Titus is an interesting character in that in the first game that he was a part of, Space Marine 1, he was actually the captain of his company. He was Captain Titus. The events of the Space Marine 1 follow. There was an orc invasion of a planet, and then there was chaos that came in, and demons and Chaos Space Marines came in to that planet, and it all went crazy. Captain Titus got accused of being tainted with chaos, and because of that, he lost his captain status and got shipped off to be a part of the Death Watch. Death Watch. I wouldn't call them a faction, but more so the Death Watch organization, which is an organization of Space Marines whose sole purpose is to fight alien threats. They're very knowledgeable. They're made up of Space Marines from many different chapters. And yeah, so you would have a Space Marine from one chapter basically show off their knowledge of how to fight this alien, or so and so chapter knows this alien, or it was basically a big mix, a big melting pot of ideas, Space Marines, and all that stuff. Space Marine 2 opens up with Lieutenant Titus, now he's a lieutenant, fighting against the Tyranids, and the entire game is mainly fighting the Tyranids, which are like space bugs. The game is fun. I haven't had the chance to play it. Life has been pretty busy. And speaking of busy, it was Thanksgiving recently. Uh, and I'd like to, say there are many things to be thankful on Thanksgiving, whether it's things that you don't think you should be grateful for, things that you realize that you've taken for granted, or things that you are just thankful for the ability to be thankful for it. There's a lot of different things, and honestly, painting this model and thinking up of what I should do with it brought that to mind, considering that spoiler alert in Space Marine 2 in the opening cutscene with your before you rejoin the Ultramarines sub-faction of Space Marines, the one that Lieutenant Titus is from, you fight with a squad of Death Watch Marines coming from different chapters and different sub-factions of Space Marines, and they all die. Big spoiler, they all die. Uh, Horrific, gruesome deaths, as per usual in Warhammer 40,000. But it really is more so like, wow, they gave up their life to fight for a cause, right? I don't know, maybe that's not something some people are thankful for, but yeah, it got me thinking, it's great to be thankful for a lot of different things, and I do wanted to bring that up since Thanksgiving, as I said, happened very recently from when I painted this model. So this model, I will be painting it in ultramarine colors. That is mainly, I believe, blue, black, and gold. Blue the main color, gold the accent trims, and black is a secondary color. I've had a very mixed reaction to the Ultramarines chapter of Space Marines. It's probably as a result of them being shown everywhere. They're the quote-unquote default color scheme because they're easy. Blue paint is easy, gold paint sticks out, and black paint is also relatively easy. I just don't like the shade of blue that Ultramarines come in. in my eyes, that shade of blue, ultramarine's blue, is very hard to work with, right? It doesn't lend itself well to like just being its own. You have to put in more work, put in more layers, shades, and stuff to kind of make it stand out more. Uh, that's why, for example, some of my more favorite chapters are salamanders, which are green and black, white scars, which are white, red, and yellow, right? Just things where the colors themselves work as well alone as if you added more to them. Ultramarines, I feel like, at least I feel like to me, don't really have that. It's really hard to make them work beyond just blue. But that's not to discredit people who enjoy Ultramarines or discredit people who spent a lot of time making Ultramarine Space Marines look really good. They're just not a faction for me. But I wanted to paint Lieutenant Titus in Ultramarine because that's where he's from. That's his chapter, his sub-faction. That is who he is and how he acts as a character. Very straightforward, by the books, sometimes, but other than that, he is a Ultramarine. What makes Ultramarines special in Warhammer 40,000 among the bunch of different chapters of Space Marines, even beyond the, I believe, 8 other founding chapters, which are the first legions of space, which came from the legions of Space Marines before the Horus Heresy, broke them all up into thousand man chapters. Is the Ultramarines is where some other chapters are good at fighting, some other chapters are good at speed, well, not tactics, but speed, stealth, a bunch of different skills. The Ultramarines are the jack of all trade chapter. They are good at everything. If one chapter has an A plus in one skill, the Ultramarines has a B in every skill. They are the all-rounder, well-rounded chapter, which coincidentally kind of goes with their color scheme being the easiest color scheme to put on a model. Blue, gold, black, very bold. But the Ultramarines are tacticians. They are smart, logical. They think through what they can do. They also follow the rule book made by their Primarch, their grand leader, Robute Guilliman. He made a book called the Codex Astartes, and if you've ever seen Warhammer and ever seen a bit of the tabletop game, you'll know that people always refer to this thing called a codex, which is an army's rule book. Uh, that's the idea. The Codex Astartes is the rule book, is the in-lore rule book for Space Marines. Tells them what they should do, what they can do. Uh, some chapters interpret it like interpret everything by the book. Like some Marines in the Ultramarines interpret by the books. Some of them are like, the books say this, but let's bend it a bit. There's a bunch of different interpretations in lore that different chapters go through with the book. Some even don't look at the book at all. But the Ultramarines are, for the most part, by the books, by the books chapter and organization, because their grand leader is the one who made the book. Of course, you'd be loyal to your Primarch, and then be loyal to the thing that he made before he went into stasis. In the current setting of Warhammer 40,000, Robute Guilliman was revived as he had sustained critical injuries during the Horus Heresy. He was put into stasis for 10,000 years, and he was brought back after this grand operation, and he is now currently very active in the setting. Robute Guilliman as a leader is where a lot of different leaders, a lot of different Primarchs, they focus on the fighting, the conquering, the warpath. Robute Guilliman is the logistician. He is the logistics man. In a war, conquering power, might, prowess is great, but Rabute Gilliman is the idea of you can't win a war without logistics. You have to be able to plan that war, see how long you can last, what are your supply routes, resources, and all that. That is Rabute Gilliman, and as such, the ways he acted in the setting is translated down into how his chapter acts. The Ultramarines are a very interesting chapter, mainly because they're the ones with all of the stories and the lore, because they are the they are the poster, not just poster models, but poster chapter of Warhammer 40,000. Anytime you see a character clad in armor, it's probably an Ultramarine. Blue, if you see a character clad in blue armor, it's the Ultramarines. In my opinion, they have great stories. They make great characters. The problem is that means that other chapters don't have as much of a time to shine. It's very unfortunate in that case, but it makes sense in a business perspective. It makes sense why Ultramarines are the major focus. And honestly, if you like Ultramarines, go for it. The entire point of the hobby is to do what you want to do what you're looking to do, what do you want to get out of it. It's not, it's not, you're not forced to do something just because you like this thing, just because you like something else or whatever. Ultramarines in the tabletop, from what I've read about the rules, I have played the tabletop game, although it is difficult to find time to, and also another person to play a tabletop game with, because it's about 3 hours if you're, of your life if everybody knows what they're doing. Generally, it can be the entire day, unfortunately. So I don't have that many games of Warhammer played, but I do know the rules and I do know how the quote unquote Ultramarines rules play. In the current edition of Warhammer 40,000, it is 10th edition. This edition focuses on giving armies a detachment, what was once sub-factions. The way detachments work is they give an overall buff to the army that you're playing and some abilities and some like little upgrades you can give to certain models. The reason why they switched to detachment, I believe, is because they used to have a sub faction sort of style of playing. Like, oh, if you can't play, let's say, Rabute Gilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, and he has a model. You can't play him in the sub faction, in the White Scars sub faction, because he's not a White Scar, which is like kind of restricting. It's like I really like this model. I want to play with this model, but I want to use these rules, but I can't because this model isn't part of this sub faction. That's probably why they switched to detachment style versus sub faction. That is something that I do like, the detachment style. It lets me be more creative. It lets me, think of it doesn't restrict me in buying certain models. If I like this model and I'm like, huh, this detachment, this army buff is cool. I'll take that and I'll use these models in that detachment. I can. Previously, I wouldn't have been able to. For example, I wouldn't be able to play White Scars characters in an Ultramarines sub-faction, which is very unfortunate. But now I can. The game of Warhammer 40,000 and the way Ultramarines work, they are the generalist, both in lore and on the table. The way they work is they have a detachment that's flavored after them called the Gladius Task Force Detachment. My goodness, quite a mouthful. This detachment is played like this. In the game of Warhammer 40,000, you have 5 turns, 1 and 2 rounds. One round being your round, and the second being your opponent's round. Of course, coin flip, who goes first, who goes second is important, but you have 5 total turns to win the game. The way that the Ultramarines themed detachment works is it gives you 3 buffs, and I believe you can choose which buff is active, but the buff can only be but your first buff is only active in the first turn, your second buff is only active in the second turn, and your third buff is active throughout the entirety of the game, throughout the rest of the game. It sort of highlights their like well-rounded nature, their ability to adapt to different situations. A couple other detachments that are like themed with other things, like I'm bringing it up. White Scars is you can run and then charge your models into the enemy in the same turn that you ran with your models. Running is different from moving. Running means you get more distance, but you can't shoot, you can't charge into the enemy. So the White Scars detachment buff gives them the ability to run and charge. Ultramarines are interesting model-wise. They are one of the factions that do have quite a lot of unique models compared to other chapters. If you're talking about chapters that are not Ultramarines, Dark Angels, Blood Angels, and Space Wolves, you are not getting a lot of chapter unique models. That's just the case because Ultramarines are very popular, but the other 3, Dark Angels, Blood Angels, and Space Wolves, are known as divergent chapters. These chapters do not follow the Codex Astartes. They don't follow the rule book, like pretty much at all, which is why they're more special and they get special models for their chapter. Kind of unfair. I would like some White Scars models beyond the one hero that is there, but there used to be more models back a long time ago. There used to be at least 1 or 2. Now there's just 1. But the Ultramarines models are very unique in that they're very nice to look at. They have, I believe, Marnius Calgar. He shows up in Space Marine 2. Big spoilers, by the way, if you haven't gone there or you plan to play Space Marine 2. He does make an appearance. And he's got some cool weapons. He's got his Honor Guard, which are 2 Space Marines, 2 Ultramarines. There is Uriel Ventress. He's got a whole book basically about horrors beyond his comprehension. If you want to read about the sick and twisted things that Chaos can get up to, he's got a good book on that. And yes, so forth and so forth. Space Marines have one of the most characters due to how lore prevalent they are, due to how many books and stories they get, which is very, very great for people who enjoy Space Marines, bad for people who enjoy other factions. Some factions in Warhammer 40,000 in general don't even have lore books. Like the Tyranids don't have lore because they're supposed to be a hive mind. You can't exactly make a compelling main character from a hive mind. Or I believe the Tau, which are the Gundam mechs faction, the Gundam mechs, communist, whatever you want to call them, faction of fish people. But if you do like Space Marines, you got a lot of books to choose from. And if you do like Ultramarines, you got a lot of books to choose from. You will always get lore, you will always get stories, you will always get more models. That's another thing. So the Space Marines being the poster children of Warhammer 40,000, they will get new models. Like that is not a question of if, that is a question of when they will get new models. They will always get new models because you gotta keep updating the poster child. The poster child has to be appealing to anyone, which is unfortunate because there are some armies that do need more models or resets. At the time of recording, there are two factions that are looking to get updated right now. That would be the Astra Militarum, otherwise known as the Imperial Guard. Personally, that's the one that I collect. They are getting an update for the Death Corps of Krieg, which are German which are a sub-faction that's based off of German gas mask soldiers, I believe from World War One, German trench soldiers. Pretty cool, pretty cool. They got some horses in there too. Cavalry is always a fun one. And also the space elves, the Eldar, are also getting their refresh. They're getting refreshed models, a new model, and it all looks very nice. I would very recommend the Eldar for people who like not exactly magic, but more so a sort of sort of like each unit in the Eldar, specifically the unit that are considered aspect warriors, which are units that do specific things. They have a specific goal that they want to perform, and they have a specific thing that they want to do on your army. That's not to say that they're the only faction that does that, but it's a stronger identity for them to have that. Where Space Marines are, everything is a block that you fit and stack onto to make a nice tower. The Eldar are like different Jenga or like different puzzle pieces that you put into your army. Going back to Space Marines, I do like Space Marines. Uh, Despite them being, in my opinion, kind of boring and bland, I do like Space Marines. I like their ease of painting. They're always fun to paint. Their gameplay is very underwhelming for me. I'm not really a big fan of the well-rounded gameplay. I like in most of the games that I play, I either like playing heavy armored tanks, or as in like a heavily armored tank or bruiser character, or a very lightweight and nimble character. And funnily enough, the Space Marines do have that in their Gravis armor and their Phobos armor, respectively, heavy and light. It's just the Space Marines themselves do not have a lot of armor variety. Now, that contradicts what I just said about the Gravis and Phobos armors, but what I mean is when I look at a Space Marine, they all look the same. Modern Space Marines look the same. When I look at the old Space Marines with their different helmets and different armor sets, when I look at the Horus Heresy series of Space Marine models, which is based in the Horus Heresy, these models catch my eye a lot more. And I think it's because of the lack of variety that modern Space Marine design philosophy allows. The Horus Heresy is allowed to be more creative, I feel, because you're not trying to appeal to new people with the Horus Heresy line of models. You're appealing to people who are new and going, no, you're appealing to people who are a bit deeper into the lore and they find these models and they're like, wow, these are cool models. I wonder why they don't put this in Warhammer 40,000 or they don't promote it as like models you can use in Warhammer 40,000. The answer to that is just strictly business. Warhammer 40,000 for Space Marines, you need to make them look cool, heroic, stoic. Warhammer 30,000, Warhammer Horus Heresy, those series of models, you just gotta make them cool. The people who buy those models and play that game are people who are already entrenched and know the setting. They know why they're playing and why they're collecting. But personally, if you look at the Horus Heresy line of Space Marines, you could proxy them, which is to use a model, which is to use something and call it something else. you can proxy them as modern Space Marines because technically that sort of armor still does exist in modern 40,000. But I think that's why I have a hard time collecting Space Marines as a whole. Their armor is too samey, and I think the worst of it would be the Desolation Marines or the Desolation Squad, which are just normal space, the normal modern Space Marines with rocket launchers. Like there's nothing special about them. At least with Gravis and Phobos, there's some variety in how they are. But the Desolation Squad kinda shows how the modern Space Marine design philosophy is kind of lacking, in my opinion. Which is why, in the future, if I decide to buy more Space Marines, unless a Space Marine model is very unique, like the Blade Guard veteran or Lieutenant Titus here, I'll probably buy the normal Space Marines, like the Foot Soldiers, as Horus Heresy Marines and just put some stuff on them. I think that would add more variety in my army and my collection, and it would just look nice. I think that the constant updating of Space Marines is necessary in order to keep the game afloat because there's a joke that Warhammer 40,000 is upheld by people who play Space Marines pretty much buying a subscription service to the game. You will buy the new model. You have to buy the new model. But for me, I think the end of my Space Marine collection journey is when I have enough models in here to feel satisfied. I have the models I want, I have the things that I want, and I think even if I never collect 2000 points of Space Marines, but I have all the models I ever would have wanted, I think I'd call it quits there. But I mean, I'm probably going to collect 2,000 points at the very least. I want to be able to play a game at 2,000 points, but I also would like to play games at 1,000 points and be able to have the ability to split it with somebody who doesn't have any models so that we can just play a game. I think the ability to play games of Warhammer 40,000 and to, have different avenues to get into it, like just sticking to the lore or painting or what have you, or the games only. I think having that sort of like connection to Warhammer 40,000 is very unique compared to a lot of different franchises. There's a lot of different avenues to come into Warhammer 40,000, and there's a lot of different avenues you can stay as a Warhammer 40,000 fan. You don't have to play the tabletop game. You don't have to collect or paint models. You don't have to read the lore. But they interconnect. They help people, connect in the community. Like, oh, I collect models. I wonder what colors I should use. Oh, this sub-faction looks cool. Let me look into their lore. Oh, they're cool. Let me see more. And then you go farther and farther. I've been joking with my friends that when Space Marine 2 released, there was a big influx of people coming into Warhammer 40,000, Warhammer 40K, and I joked with my friends that, people playing Space Marine 2 are gonna be like seeing all the normal humans and seeing how the Space Marines are like 8 feet tall, and they're gonna ask, huh, why are the Space Marines taller than the humans? Let me look that up. And the moment they look up and they ask questions about Space Marines, they're hooked. They're hooked. They've got them hooked because the next question is, huh, why are they like this? Huh, what do they do? Huh, factions? What sub-factions are there? Huh, I like this sub-faction. Let me look more into it. Huh, so they fought this alien. Oh, there are aliens. Oh, there are aliens in this game. Let me look up these aliens. Oh, these aliens are cool. Let me look up these other factions of humanity, and it just spirals and spirals. The moment you go to Google for the first time for Warhammer 40K, you're kind of gonna be stuck for a while, and you can be a very casual observer and just look at whatever you want, and it's completely fine. Different avenues to enjoy the same thing. The model that I was the model that I've been painting It started out kind of rough, kind of just blue, but I feel like I have done pretty good work on it. Of course, there are a lot better painters than me, um, and all, but I think what I'm doing is a pretty good job for where I am. I was kind of apprehensive in painting Lieutenant Titus, and that was because he's a named character. He's a character with a lot of reputation. You know, people see him from Space Marine 2, and they're like, "Oh, it's Lieutenant Titus." So I was being very apprehensive about painting him, but I think just putting the paint on the model and actually sitting down and getting to it is pretty nice. I think it's so easy to psych yourself out of painting just by thinking, "Oh, I can't paint this the way other people paint it. I won't be able to do as well." But I think being able to just sit down and just do the work helps. It really puts you in the mindset of, okay, now that I'm not thinking about how bad this can go, let me think about where I should go with this. And it really helps to, it's like warming up your brain. Once you sit down and start locking into the project, you focus and warm up your brain, which is a very good start to painting. For anyone who's very interested in starting a painting journey or in the beginnings of their painting journey, I'm no expert, I'm no master, but I can say that you can be dissatisfied with how your work goes. You can be upset that it didn't turn out the way you wanted. But what you should also do is figure out, okay, if this didn't work, what is one thing that I can take out from this? And take out one thing from the mistake. No need to constantly search for more things to take out, more things that are wrong, because it's just gonna make you more angry at yourself. It's gonna make you more disappointed at your progress than anything. There's a lot to do and a lot to figure out when you paint in this game. When you paint in this hobby, there's a lot to figure out, and the ability to just start by putting paint on the model is the best place to start. It looks like I'm currently wrapping things up with some Army Painter Dark Tone. This is a very nice wash you put into the crevices, make them pop out more, kind of like black borders on a cartoon. Very nice to add some detail. People call this talent in a bottle, and I do agree. Yes, it is very. It helps people who first start, but that's just the name. That's just a nickname people give it. The way I think of it is, it's a tool for me to use, and I will use this tool. There's a lot of different applications that you can use with it. I'm just using this to kind of bring more definition and detail to the model, especially the metallic parts. But but when people say, "Oh yes, this is just talent in a bottle," or whatever, whatever, it is, but it's also more so a tool. The paints that you use, the lessons you take are all tools for your future projects. There's something you look forward to experiment with on the next model. They are not roadblocks. They are not things that you have to overcome in your journey. You don't have to be like, oh, I won't use known oil or army paint or dark tone anymore because I feel like I'm more confident. Eventually, you horseshoe back to actually using it, and that's just how the hobby is. It's all, I get it now. Let me do this the next time, and then it doesn't work out as well, and you're like, what did I do wrong? And you go through the cycle of learning and learning and learning and failing and learning. I feel like that's also pretty like coincidentally linked to, I guess, Lieutenant Titus, whose entire thing was he did something for his, he was Captain Titus and he helped his chapter, but then he got blamed for something and he got stripped of his title. Then he became a lieutenant in his chapter and did stuff again, and was given honors as a result. A whole a whole cycle of learning, trying, failing, learning, trying, failing. It's a very interesting thing to get out of a hobby. Kind of, you can definitely get this lesson from a bunch of different areas, but I feel like painting is one of the best. Painting models might help you to get into a flow state. All you have is your paints, the model, and a completed product. Now, the model is finished. I think it's time for me to go, but a quick word, remember Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving, and thank you for watching.